Hello, my name is Marc Jeffrey, and you are listening to episode 22 of the Marc Jeffrey Podcast Show, brought to you by MPC Solutions. Yo, what the frickin' hell's up, podcasters? Thank you for joining me on another Marc Jeffrey Podcast Show, episode 22, all the twos, 2-2, from the studio on the hill, southwest UK, not a million miles from London. The Marc Jeffrey Podcast Show is now part of the Brit Pod Scene network. Check us out on Twitter by typing hashtag BritPopScene, even BritPod Scene. Check me out. Last I saw, there was about 42 podcasts in the network and all the best of British. So check it out, why don't you? Anyway, how the frickin' hell are you? How's your week been? Me? My week has been utterly nasty. I woke up this morning with this stinking chesty cough. We're 2 days into the week. We are recording in the studio at about 9:30 on Tuesday night. And everything I've done today seems to be going wrong. Do you ever get days like that where whatever you do, whoever you speak to, whatever you look at, whatever you do goes freaking wrong? Well, why does it always happen, right, when you've got shitloads to do? And I've got one hell of a lot to do this week. Kendal Calling is next week. That is the festival that I go to up in Penrith. And I've got to get all of my kit ready and packed for my brother, who's coming down on Friday to pick it up. Now, everything was going to plan up until this morning when I got out of bed. I had an awesome interview lined up with a friend of mine called Carl. He's a hairdresser, my hairdresser. He's got a shop called Lucky 13. He was coming in to talk to me about barbering and all that gubbins. So it was all going good. It was all going good until this lunchtime. He contacted me and says, Mark, something's cropped up, mate. Again, I'm very, very sorry, but I'm going to have to pull out. Shit the bed. Okay, thank you very much, Carl. I understand, mate. No problem at all. We'll be in contact again. And I'll get in contact with my reserve. Every week, whenever I have a podcast interview, I always have a reserve in line. So if something like this happens, you've always got somebody to fall back on. So I contacted a friend of mine. And I said, Craig, Carl's had to pull out, mate. Craig, please, can you help me out? He says, Mark, sorry, mate, I can't. My missus has had a cancellation for an MRI scan. She's been asked if she could come in at short notice, so I cannot be there with you this evening. Oh, Jesus. So I just then went on Facebook, and all the people that I thought would help me out couldn't help me out because it was such short notice. So what the frickin' heck do I do? Do I leave you crying in your cuppa because there's no podcast this week? Or do I just talk utter crap for the next half an hour or so, producing limited content which will bore you in itself to sleep? Either way, whatever I do today cannot win. To top it all off, I'm now on my third attempt to record in this first little bit of the show. It was all going good and my computer just crashed and I've just lost the lot. So I'm back here again at 10 o'clock this evening, messing about, trying to get this sounding as best as I possibly can for you. Now, where do we go from here? Well, I've decided that I'm going to dust myself off, pick myself up, dust myself off, and totally wing it for this week, like I always do. And I promise you, from episode 4, I think it was, I promise you that I will do my damnedest, my hardest to try and get a podcast out for you every week. So that's what I intend to do. I'm going to give it my all this week, totally wing it, and hopefully you will enjoy it. One thing that I can promise you is that I have 2 shamazing songs from 2 shamazing bands coming up on this episode. The first song I'm going to play for you now is a song by a local band down in Devon, over the water from us in southwest UK, not a million miles from London. They are called The Land of the Giants, and I want you to check this one out because it is shamazing. Here we go.
All I want is a good time, good time to relax my mind. 4 in the morning, I'm all for you. All I need is a sweet dream to return to me. 4 in the morning, I'm all for you. Wouldn't it be cool to just be cool, laying it down like you always do, funking me over like they want you to? Wouldn't it be great to buck on late and get it on, delivered on a silver plate? You don't know the way time I burn. You don't. Do I love ya? Holy for I do. Do I need it? Just my luck I do. That good times with my mind. 4 in the morning, I'm all for you. And all I need is that sweet dream to become my saint. 4 in the morning, I'm all for you. I wouldn't it be cool, but just be cool, playing it down like you always do, funking me over like they want you to. I wouldn't it be great to rock on the lake, get it on, deliver it on a silver plate. You don't know the way time I burn it. You don't. Do I love you? Holy for I do. Do I need it? Just my luck I do. Cool and just be cool, playing it down like you always do, funking me over like they want you to. And wouldn't it be great to rock on late, get it all delivered on a silver plate? You don't know the weight of our burden, you don't hold. Say you don't know the weight of our burden, you don't hold. Yeah, you don't know the weight of our burden, you don't hold. Do I love ya?
So there they are the land of the giants, and that was Holy Funk, taken from their 2015 EP, Surrender. And for more of their music, please check them out on Spotify and iTunes, and I pretty much think you can find them anywhere else, to be honest with you. Or you can hunt them down on Facebook by typing in www.facebook.com/Land of the Giants /. And if you did not get that, you didn't get a chance to write it down, don't panic. I will put it up on this week's links on my show description page. Now then, it's time for some advice from me, if you don't mind. Just before Land of the Giants, I was telling you how crap my day had been and how I had no energy and I was like, I didn't know what I was doing and how I was going to find out enough content for this episode. I was getting all stressed out. Well, I can I start again. I concluded by putting down all of my tools and going to bed early. Now, the time is now 8:20 on a Wednesday evening. And today I feel revived and ready to take on the world once again. Now, my bit of advice for you this week is as follows. It does not matter how busy you are in your life. If you're working perhaps on a big project at work, or you're doing GCSEs or A-levels or a project at a club or whatever it may be, right? You will get days when you just do not... You can't do things. You've got writer's block. You know, everything you do doesn't happen. The answer to it is just to take some time out. Sometimes, guys, you just need to. If you cannot afford it, you cannot afford to put your tools down and have an early night. There's not enough hours in the day to complete, and you don't quite have that amount of time, you know, to take a rest or a quick nap. You may say to yourself, you can't afford to waste time, but trust me, it does pay in the long run. It does pay. Now, the good thing about my job is once I am out and about of my office, because I'm a postman, if you did not know. This is the first time you've tuned in, I'm a postman. Once I've put all my letters in my frame and I've put it all in my post bag and I'm out of the office, I am my own boss. And it is one of the best jobs in the world, so they say. And as I am walking around posting my letters, delivering my parcels, I always, most days, put a podcast on and let my mind go into creative overload. And today was no exception to the rule. Today, I have come up with some cracking ideas for this week's podcast and a few podcasts down the line as well, may I add. Now, so what have I got for you? I hear you ask. Well, as I told you last week, the Marc Jeffrey Podcast Show has become a member of the Brit Pod scene. And it is a podcasting network. God, I'm struggling to say that. Every week I'm struggling. I'm sure it'll come. Now, networks are good for many things. Now, and I joined, my reasons for joining the Brit Pod scene, I got it right then, was for extra publicity, mainly, for many other things. But today I found out that networks are good for advice also. Every one of us in the network are equals. Even though our shows are all at different levels, everyone in our network, you know, we listen equally. There is always someone offering some good advice. Now, walking around on my post round today, I decided that this episode I was going to do a question and answers session. So I contacted the guys in the network and explained my situation that I, you know, for no fault of their own, I've been let down yesterday. And I was in a situation where I got a day to produce a podcast, edit it, do the whole lot, and I'm panicking. And I asked the guys to fire some questions at me. I wanted to do a question and answers podcast. So in return, I would mention their podcast on my show and request that you guys at home check them out. Of course, if you wanted to, you know, if you don't want to, don't, that's fair enough. So I had quite a good response. And some of the questions that they fired at me were very, very interesting questions. Some of them, I haven't got a clue how I'm going to answer them. Some of them are quite strange and puzzling, but I will do my very, very best to answer them. So, are you ready to hear what they asked me, guys?
The Marc Jeffrey Podcast Show.
Right, so we're ready. Starting off with question number 1. And this one is from It's Not a Podcast. It's not a radio podcast. Apologies. Right. Mark, do you usually drink port whilst recording a podcast? What the frickin' hell do you think I am? Am I some sort of alcoholic? Well, no, I don't. The answer to that, guys, is no, I don't. I don't always drink port. I like to have a nice drop of port. I got into port about a year or so ago. I haven't always drunk port. I've always been a beer and ale sort of guy. I like a glass of cider. I like a glass of cider, and I like a lager. I'm basically like most alcohol, really, to be honest with you. But port, I've taken a bit of a liking to, and I like to share it with my friends, and would like to try out new ports. So when I get somebody come in and that I'm interviewing that's possibly into their alcohol, I will chuck a glass of port at them and get them to tell me what you think. So the answer to that question is no, I don't always drink port, but it just seems to be portrayed that I do. What do you think? Question number 2, and this one's from Beyond the Box Set podcast. And they said, what has podcasting taught you so far? And if you could launch your show from the beginning again, is there anything that you do differently? Now, this is a very, very interesting and hard question for me to answer. We'll start off, we'll break it into 2 points. It says here, what has podcasting taught you so far? Podcasting has taught me a lot in the sense that it's made me realize that I can sit in front of a microphone for half an hour and talk what I would have once upon a time called rubbish. Talk rubbish to people, and people will listen to what I say. Well, now I've realized that it's not rubbish that I'm talking to people. It's valuable information. It might be rubbish, what seems rubbish to me, but there are generally people out there that listen to this information that I give, this content that I give. And it's shown me that by the amount of people that have tuned in every week to listen to my podcast. So that is what I've been taught so far, that what might be, I feel, rubbish, and that I'm all just coming on the mic and talking randomness to you, what I thought was just rubbish is not rubbish indeed. To some people out there, to my listeners out there, they do listen to what I say and they tune in every week to listen to it. And like I say, hand on the heart, I really, really, really do appreciate that. And it's like, it's quite a cutting thing inside. It's nice to know that you at home listen and enjoy what I put out there. Right. And if you could launch your show from the beginning again, is there anything that you would do differently? Now, the answer to this one, I think, would be no. I don't think I would. Because for the simple fact that I listened to a lot of podcasts and done a lot of research before I launched my show. So even though I was never a huge listener of podcasts, until I launched my podcast, I'd never really listened to many podcasts. Even though I wasn't a listener, I learned a lot before I'd launched my first podcast. And that taught me to do my research beforehand, find out what my niche is, even though I haven't really got a big niche on my podcast, I don't feel. It gave me lots and lots of starting advice and tips. So I do feel that I've done pretty much everything right. I made a plan. The one thing I probably would do, which I didn't do till about episode 6, was I would set up a promotion team before I started up my podcast. Now, when I launched my first podcast, I put it as a pilot show and I just made it and smashed it out to you at home. What I would do this time, I think, is I would have set up a promotional team of about 10 people, and I would have sent that pilot to all of my people, and I would have said, what do you think of this? What would you change? What do you think about my show? And I would have got some information back before I had launched it. And obviously then, soon as it was launched, episode 1, I would have got my promotion team to promote it for me. So that's probably what I've done. I would have also spent a little bit of extra time in designing my logo a little bit better. I think that's what I would have done. So that's the answer to that one. Hope that one's helped a little bit there. Now, we've got question number 3 here from Jack and the Geek Stalk. What an interesting name that is. Haven't checked that podcast out yet. I'm going to do that as soon as I possibly can. Who is the one guest you would love to interview on my podcast? Oh my golly gosh, what a question. There is so many people that I would love to interview. I'm really into my music. The one group that I absolutely love, being a 90s man, is The Verve. They done the song Bittersweet Symphony, History, I'm a Lucky Man, Sonnet, The Drugs Don't Work, all that sort of thing. I would probably want to interview Richard Ashcroft. I haven't read all of his book because I've never read a complete book, but I've read, I would say, about half of his book, and he seems a really, really interesting dude. But there'll be a big side of me that would want to interview Paul Gascoigne. I'm a big football fan. Paul Gascoigne, in my mind, was the best midfielder ever to come out of this country. Unfortunately, he had a lot of pressure put on him. He wasn't managed properly. Well, not as a player, but away from the pitch. You know, he wasn't managed at home properly. He's got a lot of problems, and it's such a shame to see such a talented person as Paul Gascoigne going down the wrong route to rack and ruins. And if I could interview him and possibly give him some advice and put my arm around him and help him out any way I could, I would love to have a chat to him and find out what's all the interesting things that he's done in his life and to hear all the not so nice things in his life. I would really like to interview Paul Gascoigne. So it would be a cross between Paul Gascoigne and Richard Ashcroft. And I think possibly Paul Gascoigne would edge that one. Question number 4 from We Watch Anything podcast. What prompted you to start podcasting in the first place? And did you use any other podcasters as a model? What prompted me to start? Well, as you may all be aware, before I'd done podcasting, I was a radio presenter. I had my own show, The Monday Night Jukebox, and it aired on a Monday night for NCB Radio. I'd done that, and before that I had another show called Remember the 90s from Eat Music, a small community station in Plymouth, and I really, really wanted to do radio presenting. And over the 2 or 3 years, my viewing figures dwindled, but I loved the media of broadcasting. And I've had many people in my time tell me, Mark, why don't you set up a podcast? And I've always said, I don't want to do a podcast because I want to be a radio presenter. So one day I decided I'd never ever listen to a podcast in my life. I finished at NCB Radio. I was decided that me and Liam was going to set up a little venture of our own, doing freelance broadcasting, doing a show and putting it out to the world. And one night I sat down and I decided I was going to listen to my first podcast. Now I can't remember for the life of me what podcast it was, but I remember it being utter crap. And I was just like, ugh. Let's try another one. Oh, I'll tell you what it was. It was the Joe Rogan podcast. That was the first one I ever listened to and thought it was crap. Now, after that, I thought there's got to be better out there than that. And I listened to a few other ones. And it was podcasts that... It was podcasts about making your podcast better, starting up a podcast. And I listened to it and I thought, do you know what? I can do this. I really, really can do this. And the first person that I really listened to, the first podcast that I would use as a role model would be Cliff Ravenscraft, the podcast Answer Man. I listened to him and before I listened to his latest podcast. Before I knew it, I'd listened to about 20, 30, 40 of his podcasts, and they're about an hour long each. But those podcasts taught me a lot, and it put me in the place where I am today. I got so much knowledge from Cliff Ravenscraft, and that's one guy that I would like to meet and just say, Cliff, thank you very much. I am what I am today because of you. I learned so much from him. Now, funny enough, going back now, I started listening to podcasts and I was learning about podcasts and how they're formatted and how you make them and all that sort of stuff. I went back to the Joe Rogan podcast and listened to his. First time I didn't like it. Second time it was bearable. Third time fell in love with it. And now to this day, I listen to every single one of his podcasts and I'm one of his fans. I actually idolize him now. He's one of those people where he's funny. He's brilliant with his fitness. He's a strong man. He's got an immense kick. Everywhere I look now, he seems to be there. But I would say Cliff Ravenscraft would be the podcaster that I used as a model. Thank you very much for that, Cliff. Number 5, and this one is from the Nerds, and their podcast is Rolling with the Nerdy Birds and Roleplay. What a fantastic name. I'm going to have to check that one out. If you could interview a character from a film or TV series, who would it be and what would your question to them be? What a brilliant question. Well, this guy that I would interview, he has done his own TV series. He's also been in a film. And he is a split personality. He is two people in one, you could say. If I was to say, knowing me, knowing you, aha, would you know what I was talking about? No. Okay. Well, it is Steve Coogan is his actual name, but the character he plays is Alan Partridge, Radio Norwich. You know the guy that I'm on about? He done that film, I can't remember what it was called, about him being held hostage at a radio station in Norwich. Fantastic film, made me laugh. Wasn't everybody's cup of tea, but he is a film star now, Steve Coogan, and I would like to interview him not as Steve Coogan, but as Alan Partridge. Alan Partridge is the character that he plays. He's a radio presenter, a broadcaster, a TV star, a failing TV star, shall we say, and I just find him so dry and so comical. What question would I ask him? Well, it would be, Alan, how did radio broadcasting, how did it start off for you? That would be my question. Very, very boring, I think, to most of you. But it would be Alan Partridge, and that would be his question. Question number 6 from Admit One Movies Pod. Admit One Movies Pod. That's the name of the podcast. Right. Do you aim for a slick, highly organised radio-style podcast or a more atmospheric freestyle show? Well, I'd like to chuck that one to you guys at home, because it's easy for me to say what I aim for, but whether it comes across how I aim for it, I would like to hear, a bit of comment back from you on that one. So, do I aim for a slick, highly organised radio style pod, or a more atmospheric freestyle show? When I started off on radio broadcasting, I used to write a whole script down of my whole show, and I would, just read it off. The only problem is with me is I'm absolutely crap at reading, and it was noticeable. You could tell when I was reading, and I still think you can tell when I'm reading and when I'm ad-libbing. I like my show to be slick, and I like it to be highly organised. And because I am a radio presenter, that is my background, I always think my podcasts are going to sound very radio stylish. So yes, I would say that I like my podcast to sound like that, but at the same time, I like my radio stations and my podcast to have that atmospheric thing, that electricity, where anything could happen. I do like it to be a very freestyle show where anything could happen. And so I would say, from the guys from Movies Pod, that I consider my podcast to be all of the above. I consider it to be, slick, highly organised, a radio style pod, and an atmospheric freestyle show. I don't know what you think, you guys at home. I don't know what the Movie Pod guys, what they think. But I agree. I think it's all of the above. I hope that one helps. Now, question number 7, and it is the very, very last one. And this one, I don't know how I'm going to answer this one. I went up to the missus just a minute ago and said, look, Nikki, can you tell me what you think of the answer to this question? I'm struggling on this one. Now, this one is from Ben, and he does a podcast called Nerds Chatting. Now, the problem is I'm not really a nerd, so I'm struggling on this one. The question is, you wake up with the ability to control people with just a word, like Kilgrave in Jessica Jones. Now, the problem is, I haven't got a clue who Kilgrave is, and I don't know Jessica Jones, right? Now, he says, what are the first 5 things you, with this powers? What are the first 5 things you do with these powers? Sorry, I can't read. And would you ultimately use it for the good of all humanity or for evil, selfish reasons? Now, I did say to Nikki that I would abolish money. Now, she says, why? And I says, well, because I would like everybody in the world to be equal. And I hate money. I would like to go back to the old bartering days where I'm a butcher, you're a builder, you build me a house, I'll cut up a cow for you, on those sort of lines. So I said that I would abolish money. And she comes straight back to me and says it wouldn't work. The world would go absolutely crazy. You wouldn't have doctors. You wouldn't have all these people helping because they wouldn't be getting paid. And I kind of agree with her on that one. I said to her that I would abolish religion, because religion throughout the world is the evil of the world, the way I see it. Everybody's got their own religion that they believe in that's arguing with other religions, and it's causing nothing but trouble in the world. And she said basically the same. You know, you couldn't get rid of religion because that would be taking people's beliefs away from them, and it's going back in the Stone Ages where you're telling one person they cannot do that. So what a freaking hard question this is. I really don't know what I would do. I think if I had the power to change something, I would possibly start at home, and I would speak to the Prime Minister or the Queen, and I would abolish government. Now, what I mean by that is, in this country, you've got lots of parties that work, and they all argue in the House of Lords, and you see them on the telly. You know, you have the Labour, the Conservatives, you'll have UKIP and all that lot, and they're all shouting and bickering at one another to make the world a better place, to make the country a better place. I would abolish that. I would get the Queen to say, right, you've all got to work together. Instead of arguing and bickering, all of you in the House of Lords have all, as one party, got to sit down, talk amongst yourselves and work together. So that would be number one. I would ask the Queen to get rid of parties. I would have a coalition government. Right, so that would be number one. That would be the first thing. Number two. I don't know what I would do. I really, really don't. Poverty. I would love to get rid of poverty somehow. If I could get... I know what I'd do. I would, again, speak to the government, and I would get... I'm fed up of all of these big businesses in the country avoiding tax. So I'm not necessarily saying that I would put them on a higher tax bracket, but what I would do is I would make these big corporations pay tax, so they are no different to me. You know, I would try and get a bit of equalness in working parties, so that, you know, why should I go to work every day and pay taxes when a big company at the top aren't paying the same as what I am in their money? Does that make any sense? So taxes, I'll get rid of government. I would like to get rid of disease and famine. So I would, number 3 and number 4, I would possibly pump a load of money to try and cure cancer, or try and make it so that all drugs around the world you don't have to pay for. That the drugs are there that we can all use. And similar to famine, you know, there shouldn't be famine around the world. We should all be helping one another out. So it'll be on those sort of lines. And finally, the last one was I would get some big notch man with loads and loads of money to pump a load of money into Brentford Football Club, currently in the Championship. And I would get a load of money pumped into Brentford Football Club and get them in the Premier League, playing in the Champions League against Real Madrid and winning stuff. This time as well, I would probably go down the selfish route and make me able to retire and my girlfriend to retire, and for some weird way manage to find out that I'd wake up in the morning with a couple of £1 million in my back pocket so we'd never have to work again. Oh, but that's being selfish. That is being selfish. But whatever way you do, I mean, I know that's probably more than 5 things that I've said, but whatever you try to do to save the world, I think you're always going to try and be a little bit selfish and help yourself out, aren't you? You know, even if you used to say retire early, isn't it being selfish? Isn't it? Wasn't it? Well, there you go, guys. What would you do? What would you do? Get in contact with me, jaff10@hotmail.com, and answer some of those questions. Tell me your theories on it. Well, guys, for all of those questions, thank you very much for sending them in. And please check out the Britpod scene on #BritPodScene on Twitter, and check out all of those shows that I've mentioned. And because there's some cracking shows there, the best of British. And I will be honest, I haven't checked a lot of them out because I've been very, very busy since I've joined the network. But I'm going off to a festival next week, and I'm going to have lots of time to myself. And I've got huge amounts of usage of my internet on my phone to use. So I myself will be getting on that and checking out those amazing podcasts. I just wanted to point out to you on this episode, right, the importance of being in a network. I would never have got to this stage in this podcast if I hadn't got hold of those guys today and had those questions chucked at me. You know, you don't have to be in a podcast network. I'm not saying, you know, to set up a podcast and join a network and all that lot. Talking about network on this episode is everything you do in life. It's your work, your hobbies, your sport activities you do. Anything that you do in life, right, you can improve yourself by having and joining into a network. You know, they help you gain knowledge. You can share your knowledge with people in a network. You can share experiences, and you can follow enthusiasts like yourself and learn a little bit more about the hobby, the interest that you're into. Networking, that is the word for this episode. Think about it. Time for some more music, people. Posted to me once again from Shauna at Shameless Promotions. This week we have a duo from Montreal, described as chilled to intense brooding music that binds trip hop with dreamy alternative pop. They are Discolor Blind, and this is a track taken from their debut EP, and it is called Long Vivid Dreams. If you are a fan of Portishead, I am. If you're a fan of Massive Attack, oh yes I am. And if you are a fan of Skunk Anansi, that will be me. You're gonna love this one. Here it is. This is the first single from their EP, Black and Grey. Check it out. So there we have it, guys. That was the fantastic Discolor Blind, and that song was Black and Grey. Guys, thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for listening to this week's podcast, episode 22. I didn't think that we was going to make it as long as this. I thought it was going to be like a 15-minute podcast this week, and we've gone over our time again. It has been absolutely amazing. Thank you very much to Shauna at Shameless Promotions for sending me in that song, Discolor Blind, Black and Grey. Check out that EP. I'll put the link to that on my show notes. Also, thank you very much to Andy, to Land of the Giants, for letting us play that brilliant song at the beginning of the show. It's been absolutely fantastic to be with you once and once again. There is no episode next week as I'm away up in Penrith, North UK, shall we say, in the Lake District. Beautiful scenery of Penrith. I'm going to Kenwood. What am I talking about? What the frickin' hell am I talking about? I am going to Kendall Calling. It's going to be absolutely amazing. So there might not be a podcast for the next 2 weeks, depending on how freaking knackered I am when I get home. So I will see you when I see you. Apologies for that. You take care of yourselves. Have a nice holiday. It's in the UK here now. The kiddywinks are breaking up. Summer holidays is starting, so it's going to get freaking hot here now. We're all going to be sweating our asses up. It's going to be so hot. We're going to have kids running around our feet, and you're going to be wanting to go back to work as soon as you possibly can. Enjoy your holidays, and I will see you when I see you. Look after yourselves and others, and remember, this will last. One thing that I've got to say to you for 2 weeks: your life may not be as crazy as you once thought it was.